agreeing to do this via Zoom a week or so later when we had to cancel it due to weather. And hopefully you all made it home safely that day. It was, the rain was wild. Luckily it was not too bad damage-wise there. But so Sarah Lauren, I'm just going to go ahead and pass it over to you. Sarah Lauren has been involved with orientation for years and years and has served on that committee and help make it what it is today. And so she's one of those people that will be looking at all those survey responses and, you know, we look at those and make changes moving forward. So I'll turn it over to you, Sarah Lauren.
All right. All right. Well, good morning, everybody. And I appreciate y'all taking the time with me this morning, or if anybody watches this after the fact, you know, thank you for taking the time to look it over. As the orientation committee met and tried to figure out what things we needed to do to make the realtor experience better, it was kind of giving everybody a lay of the land on how to operate. And inspections are a huge part of what we do now. You know, they didn't do home inspections like in the early 90s. So if they did, it was pretty rare. Now it's so commonplace that we just have to know what to do with that information and how to work with each other to make the experience as good as it can be for our clients and for each other. So we said, let's do a session on inspections, just kind of a primer, really. There's so much to the inspection process. It can be as detailed or as basic as someone wants it to be. So we're going to just do sort of a good general overview of a few different kinds of inspections and some of the forms that are involved with that. So as we do this, I think we've got an intimate enough group that we don't have to do the chat box. So if you have a question, feel free to unmute and ask the question, and we'll answer it in real time. And then, you know, Christina is going to watch the chat box too. So if for some reason we pass that by and you don't feel comfortable unmuting, just, you know, go ahead and put it in the chat box. But I'm fine with people unmuting and having this be more of a conversation. So with that said, let's go into the disclaimer that obviously whatever I say, if your broker has told you something else, your broker is going to be the one that's with you during this process and if anything happens. And so your broker is the one that is also liable with you in your practice of real estate. So if there is something that your broker says, your broker is right. So, and if your broker isn't right, you need to take it up with the Board of Realtors. So, but whatever I'm telling you is based on my experience and how one particular company does it. But there may be some nuances that your broker prefers you do. So check with your broker on anything you have questions about. Obviously, this is not going to make you an expert in inspections. I've been doing this 27 years and I learn something literally every single day. And the process does change, information changes. So be curious and ask lots of questions. All right. In this market, it is typical to have an offer made based on a home inspection. And then if the offer is accepted, to then do your home inspection. In some markets, they want to do the inspection first. I will tell you, every now and then we'll have that happen here. But just like anything else, you have to involve the seller if you inspect to do anything on their property. When I do this class in person, I always ask people, you know, who owns the house? And everybody kind of looks at each other like, is that a trick question? You know, who owns the house? And until you leave the closing table, the seller owns that house. They're responsible for it. It is their investment. It is their property. A lot of times we feel kind of ownership over things because we have been chosen to represent it if you're the listing agent, but you don't own that house. You are a representative of the person who does own that house. So I actually had someone inspect a house that, or I had a buyer actually try to buy a house. And we found it was one of our listings. And we found out that a buyer had done a home inspection without telling the seller. And it created a whole host of issues down the road with the new buyer, thinking that people were trying to pass something off on them. The seller was upset because their house had been inspected. They didn't know it, number one, and number two, they never got a copy of the home inspection. So they felt violated, and guess who was the violator? A realtor who let an inspector in to do an inspection without permission. That hurts you and me as realtors because we all share that realtor brand. And so we just have to be very careful to make sure that the seller is aware of whatever we're doing on their property. So the reasoning that we do the inspections after the offer is made and accepted is because that inspection addendum gives the protocol what to expect during the course of the inspection period. How long is it going to take? What happens once the inspections are finished? How long do people have to respond and get information, to remove the inspection contingency? Because otherwise the inspection contingency could just be out there until the day of closing, and then they just say, oh, I don't like the condition, I'm backing out. So it gives the protocol, and that saves a lot of people a lot of heartache and keeps a lot of people from the liability that can happen if a decision isn't made quickly on the condition of a home. Once the inspection is done, the inspection addendum usually will tell us at what point you need to have your request for repairs in, and then how it's responded to. So let's get into that inspection addendum. This one that I'm going to go over today is actually from Madison County. So Madison counties may be different from other boards. The Huntsville area has one. You may have a different board and your inspection addendum may look different. You may not have an inspection addendum and you may want to have one written, but that's between you and your broker. So just for information purposes of what is typically in a home inspection, it typically has a reference back to the contract. It has the names of the parties in the contract, and then what the address is, a disclaimer that the purchaser acknowledges that the purchaser is not relying upon representation of the broker or any licensee about the condition of the property. We're not builders, we're not home inspectors. We don't know all of the details of those systems of the house. So we want to stay in our lane and make sure they have the opportunity to have a specialist come in and look at all of the things that we might not be qualified to endorse. But at their own expense, the buyer's expense, and within however many working days you put in that blank, they would have the property inspected for major defects and or hazardous conditions, either personally through registered inspectors, licensed contractors, and here's a kicker, or other competent persons of purchasers' choosing. Now, every realtor probably has a story about the other competent persons of purchasers' choosing. Christina knows mine is Uncle Bobby. Uncle Bobby from New Orleans used to be a builder and had a buyer, and he had to have Uncle Bobby inspect everything. Uncle Bobby stopped building houses 15 years ago, and he never built in North Alabama. So the soil is different, the building codes are different, the styles of houses are different. A lot of stuff is different. And so I had to kind of encourage the buyer to have a home inspector that is familiar with North Alabama be the home inspector. But if Uncle Bobby wanted to come and give his 10 cents, he could do that. So, but regardless, the way that this one's written, it's whoever they feel is a competent person of purchasers' choosing. Now, this one says that within 3 working days of completion of the inspections, the purchaser would give the seller a copy of the home inspection at no cost to them, because it is their house, and a request for repairs if there are repairs to be made. Now, or repairs that it would be the sale would be contingent upon. Now, I'm going to go back to the working days for the time frame on your inspection. If you put in there that you have 7 working days to do an inspection, that would be 1 work week plus 2 days. So let's say you bind the contract and you ratify it and it's all accepted on a Sunday. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday would be the first 5 days of your inspection period. It's working days, so it would not count Saturday and Sunday, and then it would count Monday and Tuesday. Let's say you wait until that second Monday, day 6, to do your home inspection. and they say, gosh, there's structural work that needs further evaluation that I, the general home inspector, am not going to be able to give an opinion on. You need to have someone else come look at it. And that structural person can't come until the following Friday. You're outside of your inspection period. So it's always a good idea to try to get the general inspection done as soon as you can, so that if you do have additional time involved that's necessary to get other specialists in, you've got that time allotted. You can have an extension if the seller's willing to do that. We've got to keep in mind, when a house is under contract, we're supposed to mark it contingent in the computer. And if it's contingent, a lot of other buyers are not going to come look at it until they determine if that contingency is going to be removed and the house go ahead and sell, or is it going to cause the sale to fall through and have the house be put back on the market. So a lot of buyers aren't going to come and see it during that period, and the seller's not going to want a lengthy inspection period that might keep them from obtaining other buyers. All right, does anybody have questions so far? I'm awesome then. I'm sorry, just kidding. All right, let's move on. So after your inspection's done, you do your request for repairs. There's usually in an inspection addendum a response time frame. So they had 3 working days to give the seller the request for repairs. If they don't do it within that time frame, then the house is automatically deemed accepted and the contingency is removed. But if they give the inspection repair request, and then the seller doesn't respond in the time that they're allotted, which in this case is 3 working days, then the seller has automatically agreed to the last proposal, which would have been all of the items in the request for repairs. So not responding is not a good idea. The catch is it's up to the purchaser, it's up to the agents to maintain the timeframes. So if your buyer doesn't respond within their 3 working day period, and the seller's like, woohoo, I don't have to do any repairs, and then your buyer comes back and says, no, I wanted repairs done, and you didn't encourage that list to be made during the allotted time frame, you're going to be in trouble with your buyer. And conversely, if the seller gets a request for repairs and doesn't respond within the 3 working days that they have to respond, then the buyer says, woohoo, seller's going to do all my repairs. And then the seller's going to be upset. Wait, I didn't want to do all the repairs. So keeping the time is going to be really important for you as an agent. Now, if the seller does not agree to make all of the repairs that the purchaser asks for, there are generally going to be some remedies of the paperwork, that some solutions that are provided. One, in this particular case, they can accept the seller's decision and proceed to closing. They can submit a new request for repairs. So, hey, the seller's response said that they would do items 1, 2, and 3, but not 4, 5, and 6. The buyer may look at that and say, okay, I get it, but out of 4, 5, and 6, I won't buy the house if they don't do the ones they've already said and number 6. So they renegotiate, or they can walk away and get their earnest money back. Now, again, failure, unless previously agreed to in writing, failure of either party to respond within the allotted time will be conclusively deemed acceptance of the other party's proposal. I can't say that enough. And the realtors are up to keeping the timeline. All right, on extending I did see the chat for once in my life. On extending the inspection period, is there a form for that, or is an email acceptable written form? That's going to be between you and your broker. I like to have it on an addendum. There's a form called an addendum to contract. You can do it that way. In some cases, an email, would be fine if that's okay with your broker. All right, any other questions? All right, down towards the bottom of the inspection addendum, it gives some further definitions. So a major defect is a defect that threatens the structural integrity or significantly denies the intended use of a substantial portion of the property. Hazardous condition obviously is one that threatens health and safety. they talk about a little bit more about codes and which, the codes that were in effect at the time of the home's construction, I should say, or their modifications. Like if it had been significantly renovated and it should have been updated to a certain code and they didn't do it, then that can be a code item. But to go into a house that's been untouched since 1955 and get upset that they don't have GFCI plugs is not really reasonable, because that was not required of the house when it was built. Now, it is safety, so some people will still say it's a health and safety issue, and then that's really a negotiation between the buyer and the seller. But there are a lot of things you can't expect a house that was built before certain codes or certain building types were even invented to have those things if they haven't been renovated. It refers back to the finance sales contract or whatever your main document would be. In this case, it talks about the HAR finance sales contract that has paragraph 4A that says it remains in full force and effect. That's the one that says that heating, cooling, electrical, plumbing, gas systems, and appliances have to be in normal operating condition when title's passed. So that gives you the opportunity that if there's a major HVAC issue, although it's not health and not safety, or I guess it could be health and safety, but it's not structural or any of that sort of thing, it still applies because it was something that the purchaser was told in the contract they had to inspect for themselves. Any written notice to a party's agent or transaction broker is deemed notice to that party. So if your buyer or your seller is on a cruise ship out in the middle of the Mediterranean with no coverage and you need to reach them, they need to be contacting and getting back in touch with you, because that 3 working day period starts when the agent receives the information. And then, of course, closing the sale will constitute acknowledgement of the purchasers that the property was acceptable at the time of closing, unless otherwise agreed to in writing. When they say otherwise agreed to in writing, that refers back to a final inspection form that we usually have to have before closing. A lot of your brokers won't even pay your fee to you until you have that final inspection form in your file. And that just says that the purchaser accepts the property in its condition that day of closing. And if there were things that still needed to be done, there's a section where you can write those in and determine whatever agreement will take place after closing to try and finish up those repairs. Now, this is another big one too, especially when you're talking time frames. You always need to look at what the information is on what is considered a working day and what is not. Especially this time of year, it always kind of is very obvious to me, because we've got, we just had Thanksgiving, we've got Christmas, New Year's, all these holidays. In calculating any time period under this agreement, the commencement day shall be the next working day. In the event that a performance deadline occurs on a Saturday, Sunday, or holiday as defined in herein, the performance period shall be extended to the next working day. So let's say you get your request for repairs on Monday, and the seller has 3 working days to respond. So if you get that on a Monday, the performance days would be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Now, if you get that on a Monday, the week of Thanksgiving, you have 3 working days, but Thanksgiving is cited in your contract as a holiday, you would have Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday's not a day, Friday. So you'd have until end of business, 11:59 p.m. on Friday to make the response. So all those little things, they can trip you up, but hopefully it wouldn't happen if you just focus on it. All right, any questions there? All right, we're gonna move on to what an inspection report looks like. So this is a report summary. They're gonna look different from inspector to inspector. It really just depends on what program that they use. They don't all use the same technology, but most of them will have some sort of an app on their phone or a computerized thing. As they go through the home inspection, they just are sort of jotting things down as they go. and then their system, their technology, their app will synthesize it into the report at the end. It's infinitely better than when they used to do the little NCR paper and they had to do pencil and write everything after they had done the home inspection. That took forever. So the process is a lot better these days. But with the report summary, that itemizes all the things that really need some sort of work done, some repair, or, hey, you need to be really aware of this issue because it may be coming up for repair soon. And then there's the general report. And the general report is going to be, in some cases, it's 70 pages long. But a lot of that will have more information about how systems of a house work, changing filters, maintenance items, things that someone needs to know, almost like a manual of how to own that house and how to take care of it, as opposed to, hey, this is your laundry list of things you need to do to repair the house before you buy it or while you're living there. So usually the realtors are going to look more at the report summary for items that need to be remedied before closing, but then the general summary is really just more a primer on how to live in that house and take care of it. Now you'll see that these are sectioned, interior areas, bathroom. They're going to give photographs. So when they talked about the interior areas, in the general section, it also has photographs a lot of times, which is great because a lot of our buyers may not be there for the home inspection. They may be out of town. They came for a marathon tour to look for a house and they bought one and then had to go home, back to wherever they're moving from. And they leave the agent to sort of meet the inspector and have the inspection done. Well, now they have the ability to see what it is that the inspector was seeing. And it makes it a lot easier than sort of speculating. I don't remember exactly how the wet bar was configured. Here they can just look at it and see it and understand what it is that is needing to be fixed. They'll usually have some kind of indicator of what it is that they're mentioning. So the top picture has a doorbell that is missing a screw at the bottom, and there's a little yellow arrow pointing, doorbell, here's the doorbell, doorbell's missing a screw, alert the media. But they basically have another door that, the latch was rubbing, it needed to be adjusted. And then in some cases it's, a much more serious repair. So the request for repairs at least in HAR, we have a form, and it's a pretty basic form. It's really just got the header that sort of refers back to the contract, has the wording of releasing the contingencies of the contract if these repairs are made. What I find a lot of people doing is they'll just sort of do a laundry list from the home inspector. They'll cut and paste exactly what the home inspector said. That's not a bad thing, but I'm going to offer something to you just as a suggestion. I like to use these like a punch list. So when you have a punch list for a builder, the builder usually gives the electrician all the electrical items and the plumber all the plumbing items, and they don't make them read through an entire document to sift the things that refer to them. It makes it a lot easier for a seller to see also, gosh, I had 12 electrical items. I only had 2 plumbing items, but chances are they're really going to want to get those electrical or feel compelled to have those electrical things done because there's a bunch of them. And it's a little more compelling. It's also easier to give that to the electrician to fix everything in the first visit, and not to have the buyer come back and say, okay, in my laundry list that I did not separate, they missed a couple of things. Then you have to pay the electrician to come back with a service call, and it's more expensive, and it messes with your time frame when they could have done everything when they were there if your request for repairs was easier to use. So I like to put all the electrical together, plumbing together, HVAC together, general contracting together. I'll also add a licensed electrician or a licensed plumber or a licensed whatever, because we do have a lot of people here who want to do the repairs themselves. They want to save a little money. But my question to that is always, what happens if something happens? So your electrical engineer client who owns the house gets a bunch of electrical items on their repair request. And they say, well, I'm an electrician. I'm an electrical engineer. I know how to do all this. And they go and do the work and they sell the house and the house burns down. So buyer comes back and says, you did this incorrectly. Who's responsible? An electrician has insurance for that sort of thing, and they're licensed for that sort of thing. And there's sort of a layer of protection for the seller. And I usually will tell my sellers, you really need to kind of step back from this a little bit. And you know, maybe share that liability. You can give the paid receipt. They can call the electrician if anything goes wrong, and you're sort of protected. Of course, anybody can sue anybody for anything, but part of our job is helping to negotiate and navigate these situations with our clients. And usually a licensed person is going to, you know, be able to do a little better job maybe. So the other thing is I try to specify if they have a particular way something needs to be fixed, it's better to go ahead and say it than to have the seller fix one thing one way and have the buyer say, no, that's not what I intended. I wanted you to fix it this way. And then they've wasted the money and the time and everybody's upset. Conversely, you want to make sure that the way you write it doesn't make your buyer difficult to work with or to please, because then the seller's like, I'm never going to please this person. So for instance, I might say, instead of there is deteriorated wood at the northern eave, I might say seller to replace the deteriorated wood on the northern eave and repaint to match existing trim. There's no Bondo happening in that instance. Now they might cut out the section and then piece it together with another piece. If you don't want it that way, you could say a solid piece, but most people just want whatever is deteriorated to be, you know, replaced. But I have had sellers actually replace the wood and then not repaint it. That was bad. And we figured it out, but it would have been a whole lot easier if we just said, and just paint to match existing trim. Keep it simple. Also, try not to put seller to repair the blank, seller to repair the blank. It's very clearly written here. The understanding is the seller to repair the following, and then name them. I had one that they had, I think it was like 40 items, and some of them were really little, but every item started with seller to repair the, and after a while, it was like death by paper cut. The seller got madder and madder every time they saw that. It felt like they were having their you know, someone shake their finger at them. And it could have been so much simpler and easier to read, honestly. So just keep in mind that these are part of your negotiating skills. How you write this and how they read it is going to play into how everybody leaves that closing table. Are they going to be happy and feel good about the situation? Or are they going to be mad? And I don't like mad. So any questions there? All right. At the bottom, again, it refers back to seller agrees to deliver the appliances, heating, cooling, electrical, plumbing, gas systems, and appliances in normal operating condition when title is passed or possession given, whichever occurs first. And then both the parties sign it. If it's agreed to, the seller will sign it. Purchaser is going to sign it when they write it. But then if the seller signs it, that is an accepted request for repairs and you move towards closing. If they don't want to accept it that way, then you would have a response to the request for repairs. Now, if it's just a little change, sometimes they'll strike something through and then just modify whatever little thing they do, and they'll initial the original request for repairs rather than rewriting something. On the request for repairs response, I'll tell you it's a little different than the counteroffer form. So when you make an offer and the offer is countered, the counteroffer form says everything stays the same except. And everything on the counteroffer form is the only thing that changes on the finance sales contract. Everything else on the finance sales contract stays the same. With the response to the request for repairs, I like to reiterate all of the things that I'm going to fix. So if I'm working for the seller, I'm going to go in and from that request for repairs, pull all of the things they've requested. And whatever the seller is not willing to do, I'm going to take that out. So this references made to that certain contract for sale and the certain request for repairs as submitted by the purchasers. The request for repairs is countered and the parties agree as follows. Even though it says it's countered, I don't like the idea that there's going to be this request for repairs form with some of the repairs I'm going to do. And then there's this response to request for repairs with the other repairs I'm going to do. I want one list. I want it indisputable. I want it clear and easy to use. So I'll put everything the seller is willing to repair the following, and I'll put all of them on one list. Again, you're trying to make it easy to use. And then this says by mutual agreement, the contract for sale, let's say the inspection contingency in the contract for sale is hereby released upon the completion of said repairs. So this takes away your inspection contingency. After this, you move towards closing. All right, so we're going to get into different kinds of inspections. Anybody have anything before we jump into that? All right. Some of the inspections that you're going to come in contact with, of course, pest and termite inspections, radon, lead-based paint, septic systems, structural evaluations, asbestos. Some people are going to want to have separate roof inspections, separate HVAC inspections. You know, there are all the kinds of inspections you could ever want. The main ones we're going to see would be a termite or pest report. So a letter and a bond are totally different. If you leave this time together knowing that, you're going to know way more than a lot of people do, because you can ask almost anybody, do you know the difference between a termite letter and a bond? And they don't. A termite letter is actually a state form. They call it an Alabama wood infestation report. So if you hear somebody say a WIR, that's what they mean, a termite letter, wood infestation report. A letter is not a bond, though. So a letter and a bond, see, a bond implies that treatment has taken place. There has been some actual chemical or process done to either kill or repel termites. A letter is just a visual inspection. They come and look at it. If they don't see any evidence of active infestation, they'll write the letter and you're good to close. But a bond is better. Think of that, BB. A bond is better. A bond is more. A bond is more protection. So bonds are usually inspected quarterly or yearly. They're going to be separate from your pest spray, and it can transfer to a new homeowner depending on the pest control company. So it's all mandated by that actual company. There are a lot of local companies, and then a lot of them have been sort of franchised. But for the most part, they're going to all offer the possibility of bonding. You've got different kinds of bonds. There's a repair replacement bond or just a retreatment bond. So that may be a question you would want to ask. Retreatment says that if it's bonded and you've got, you have an infestation, all they're going to do is come back and retreat it. If it's a repair replacement bond and you've got an infestation and they discover there's damage that has occurred from that new infestation, the company would actually repair and retreat. So repair the damage and then retreat the house. There's a Centricon system. So those are those little green baiting systems that are all around the property. That's a baiting bond. And what it does is it tries to attract termites to the bait systems. In the baiting systems, when they inspect, they'll come and just pull the tops off of those and pull the little canister out. The canister has basically a cellulose product in it, like wood. If there are termites in that area, they'll then put their chemical in its place, put it back down in there, and then the termites that have been attracted will come and eat the chemical, take it back to the colony, and it kills the colony. It actually takes one of the life cycles away of a termite. Really ask lots of really strange questions, but that's what it is. Apparently there's however many life cycles to a termite, and whatever this chemical is keeps one of those life cycles from being able to happen, which kills the colony. The other is actually a trenching system. So they'll come around the perimeter of the house and will actually douse the foundation and under the house with chemical that repels or kills termites. And so if you ever see a house that has little dots in the brickwork or in the concrete slab, it almost looks like little chicken pox all in a row every 6 inches apart or whatever, that is typically a treatment for termites. So you can pretty much look at it and go, okay, they've either had a bond, it may not still be active if they haven't kept it up every year, but it looks like it has had some treatment at some point. Okay, before we leave termites, Jill, let me go back to termites real quick. With termites, you also have a wood infestation report. It's going to look at a couple of different things, not just termites. That's why they don't call it a termite letter. They call it a wood infestation report. They're going to look for powder post beetles, subterranean termites, and wood decaying fungus. And so wood decaying fungus has been something that we have had to deal with a lot lately. It's usually kind of a white powdery substance that is on the subfloor and floor joists. And so the inspectors will cite it so that you kind of realize, hey, your pest inspector may come in and want that treated. If the crawl space has less than, I think it's 18 to 20% humidity, they say that wood decaying fungus is not supposed to grow in a low humidity area. So if they've got dehumidifiers and all that stuff, the wood decaying fungus may be old, but if it's not and it's active, they're going to want to treat it. And so you just need to be aware that that's something that can rear its head at you before you're closing. All right, radon is another thing that we usually have. Home inspectors have added that to their a la carte list. They don't always do them. So when you hire a general inspector, you need to ask your buyer, do you also want to have a radon test? And they'll ask them too, but the buyer may not know what it is that they're being asked. So a radon system, a radon test looks for radon, which is an odorless, colorless, carcinogenic gas. It is naturally occurring in the environment. No radon test will ever be zero because it's all around us. But the idea is it comes out of fissures in the earth. It's a gas that comes from, the core of the earth. And guess what? We are on a swirling, churling ball of gas in the universe. And one of those gases is radon. So if there's a fissure and you have put a house on top of that fissure, it's going to trap the radon that's releasing from the earth in that house. And so that's why you might have one house that has a huge radon level and then another that doesn't, because that other house, even next door, may not have been put near or on an area where that gas is being released. So the idea is you want to mitigate, to vent that house from that radon that's coming up out of the earth. So testing wise, there's a couple of different ways to test it. One is this charcoal test. It's a little canister. It's an absorption test. Some of the positives to that is it can be less expensive. I know the Madison County Extension Office will give these, they'll sell these, I think they're like $20. It's over on Cook Avenue. And if you go and most inspectors will say you need to do 2 of them side by side. That way you can tell if one is really high and one is really low and they were sitting right next to each other with no other changes, there was some problem with your inspection. If they're both about the same, you know that it's sort of a normalized test and that your reading would be more legitimate. The need to verify the accuracy, can take longer. you end up having to come in after 48 hours, take this canister. There's certain protocols that they give you to sealing it up, mailing it off, mailing it off to the lab. Once they receive it, then they have to process it. They figure out what your reading is, and then they email it to you. So it takes longer. The other kind of test I'm going to tell you about is much more immediate. So the other is a mechanical testing. It is a mechanical system that takes an air sample every hour on the hour for a 48-hour period. As I'm told, they take the high number and the low number, and they throw those out and they average the rest. If the reading is 4.0 picocuries per liter of radon in the air or higher, EPA will say you need to mitigate that radon in the house. You need to vent the house. Now this system, what's neat about it is because it's mechanical and it takes those air samples, you're going to get a reading of where your peaks and valleys were that you can't get with an absorption test. Absorption is just, it sat in the room and here's what it says after that. This says, okay, we had a pressure front that came through on, let's say at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and you go and you look at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, that pressure front, and you got a spike on your radon test. Chances are that radon kind of was influenced by the weather. Or if it was really low and then all of a sudden one big peak, or if it was all kind of peaky, high and low, then you kind of know there's a consistent release of radon in the air. So it's pretty interesting data. If you've got data people you're working with, they love that. But the con is it can be more expensive. I say that, but some home inspectors, when they offer a radon test, they'll charge the same amount as other inspectors charge for this test, even though it's the absorption test, so you don't get all that extra data. So just, it's a good question to ask your home inspector. Number one, do you do radon testing? Number two, what type? And then what do you charge for it? Now, it's important for us to also understand about radon mitigation, because some people go, oh my gosh, it had a 5 rating. I can't buy this house. I have to go find something else. And it's their dream house, and they go find a house that's not really their dream house, but maybe the radon isn't high, and they test that house and it's 60. And then you just shot yourself in the foot, because you could have mitigated your dream house and been there happily living this whole time, but yet, you forced yourself to buy another house and the situation is no better. Radon is a situation in our geographic area of the country. So us needing to know how to mitigate it is going to be helpful for our buyers. So this is a diagram that I got out of a realtor magazine, and I'm trying to figure out how to explain this to people. So when you think about it, say this is a slab construction house. So that lower foundation is just a big slab of concrete. When they have a high radon reading, they will puncture, just like they've done on this picture, they'll puncture that slab and they'll put a PVC pipe down into the substrate under the house, under the slab. Then they attach a fan somewhere. Now, in this rendering, it's in the attic where it says radon vent pipe, blower, or fan. They'll put the fan either in the attic, or they may take that pipe outside of the house and attach it to the outside of the house. But the fan creates a vacuum, a suction underneath the slab, and then it allows a venting area above it, and it sucks the radon out before it rises up into the house and vents it into the atmosphere where it's supposed to be in the first place. Now, on this rendering, it also has the PVC piping and then an indicator system. The indicator system is what they call a manometer. And if you've ever seen those, they're the little U-shaped tube of water. And it's usually a colored water, like a red, or they got some sort of a dye in it. But if the water level is skewed, not level, but skewed, one side higher than the other, it means there's a pull in that system, and the system should be creating that vacuum. If it's level, your fan is probably dead and the pipe is just sitting there, and it's what they call a passive system. A lot of the not home inspectors, a lot of the home builders, the new ones, before they pour the slab, they're putting in a radon pipe They won't add the fan just yet, but if your buyer does a radon test once the house is finished and they're doing inspections for the new construction, if the radon rating is high, then it makes it a lot easier. All I have to do is add the fan to create the suction. Otherwise, it's just a passive system. It's a pipe basically under the house that goes all the way out. If it is a crawl space house, it is going to be a more expensive installation for the mitigation system because it's not as simple as just popping the hole in the slab. You have to go in and add the sheeting, polyethylene sheeting. It has to be a certain thickness. It's supposed to be adhered to all the perimeter walls. They have piping underneath it to try and collect that radon with that suction, but they have to create the barrier that a slab naturally creates. And so they do that with plastic. So encapsulated crawl spaces, they sort of do some of that. A lot of times, if people are going to do a radon system, if they can afford to do the encapsulation, a lot of times they'll do that too. But just because it's got a vapor barrier is not encapsulated, don't think it doesn't have a radon system. And I want you to see what a radon system might look like. So these are pictures of radon systems that are installed on the exterior of a house. So you might have a fan in an attic, but most of the ones that I've seen are exterior installations. So the one on the left shows the venting point. It has to be beyond a certain distance of a window or a door. It has to be a certain distance from any kind of a vent, because what it doesn't want is the house to suck the radon back in to an entry point. They want to make sure that that radon gets way up and out and not get sucked back into the house. So there are requirements of that. This exterior vent cover is sort of flat looking, but you can kind of see the vent pipe kind of come in, up and out of it. The one on the far right, we see those a lot as well, and that is a radon, a different type of a fan. All right, we have a chat. How do you know when to do a radon test? You don't. You don't, and it's an odorless, colorless carcinogenic gas. So you don't know that it's there. It's supposedly, and I say this because I am no doctor, but they say that it's one of the main causes of lung cancer. So if you hear a lot of people with lung cancer that never smoked or any of that sort of thing, sometimes people wonder if radon was a factor. And it could be, like, I've had sellers that have said, okay, I want to do a pre-listing home inspection. I just want to know if there's anything I need to do. I don't want to be surprised by it. Should I do a pre-listing home inspection? And if it hadn't been inspected within 5 to 10 years, I usually tell them, yes, go ahead and fix the things that you need to fix. And then you don't have any big surprises at the closing. But then they'll say, should I get a radon test? And my answer to that is, if you are worried for your own safety, absolutely. You know, I tested my house when I was just living there and we installed a radon system. I want you to be safe living in this house. But if you're doing it just for the buyer, no, because you may inspect it one day and it'll be a 4, and then the next day it'll be or the next month even, it would be a 20. And then you might test it and it's a 2. It's cyclical and it's weird. Radon is hard. It's just hard. So some people think that a short-term test is not really enough. So some sellers will say, okay, if I had a 3.9 or a 4.0, 4.0 being EPA's mandate for mitigation, they'll say, well, you just didn't test long enough. You know, if you're living in a house, you're going to be living there. Let's test it for a week. And when they test it for a week and do the average, it shows below 4. But the minimum for an inspection is 48 hours. That's what EPA says is the bare minimum. We have had some sellers pushing back lately who have said, you know, hey, if it's 3.9 or if it's right at 4, I'm not going to install a system for a buyer. That I don't recognize that, or I want to test it for longer. But again, you've got your inspection period time frame you're trying to deal with, and so we sort of work in minimums, trying to work the sale in a timely way. All right. The next one's lead-based paint. So the thing about lead-based paint is we need to know about it. We have to have the disclosure in your file. If a house is built 1978, or if it's older than 1978, which I am. But if the house was built 1978 or earlier, you have to have a lead-based paint disclosure in your file. If you are leasing, if you're going to be a leasing agent, you're supposed to have lead-based paint disclosures in your paperwork with the renter even. And that is something the EPA has actually fined realtors $11,000. I mean, I think when we were doing this before, one of our previous staff people at the board, they had heard a higher even that than the 11,000. So the EPA can, if they come in and audit your files at your office and you don't have that EPA disclosure in there, they can fine you pretty big bucks. So just don't do that. It is required of buyers and tenants. The disclosure is in your documents with in .loop and in Paragon, but this is the booklet that goes with it. And in the paperwork, it says that you have given that client this booklet. Now, it's provided by EPA. It's really helpful for if the people they want to buy the house, but they're worried about lead-based paint, or they're planning to do renovations, or they have children or whatever. This tells you all the things you need to do and how to live in a house with lead-based paint. They also need to know that in some cases, when they do paint the house, they're going to have to get a painter that will do lead-based paint. And usually they're not as funny unless it's like a historic district. Historic district, everybody pretty much knows most of the houses, if not all, have lead-based paint all over them. And they're under a little bit higher scrutiny. So some of them will say, hey, I don't have my lead certification. So if the city sees me painting this house, I'm going to lose my license and I'm not going to do that. But there are a lot of painters that are fine with houses with lead-based paint because they know how to handle it. Main things are to take your paint chips. So, a lot of painters will just scrape and then leave it all in the ground. But the lead in the lower layers of the paint can deposit the lead in the soil, and then you go garden or plant flowers or whatever, and you get lead poisoning from the soil. So they need to dispose of paint chips and protect themselves, or if your client is going to do renovations to the house, protect themselves if they're going to disturb painted surfaces. The thing about testing for lead-based paint is a lot of people will go to like Home Depot or whatever, and they'll buy the lead-based paint test kits, and it's a swab test. So let's say, my desk that I've got my computer on is a painted desk, and I've just painted it. Well, the paint that I've just bought to paint it is not going to have lead in it. But the lower levels, if it's a really old desk, might have lead in it. And you aren't going to know that from a swab test, because the swab test is only going to get that top layer, which was created, the paint was created, however many, a year, a month, whatever ago. So a true lead-based paint test, you have to actually get the lower levels out, and most sellers don't want you scraping up their house to inspect it. Same thing with asbestos. A lot of asbestos takes puncture tests, so they're going to want a sample. So let's say you've got a kitchen floor and you think there might be asbestos in the lower levels, but it's a tile floor on top of that. They're going to have to puncture all the way down to the original subfloor to see if there's asbestos in those under layers. And most sellers are not going to let you tear the house up to inspect it. All right, any questions on that? So some buyers look at their inspection period and they say, oh, I'm going to get a VA loan, so I don't need an inspection because the VA is going to inspect it for me. Or FHA too. FHA is going to send an appraiser, and the appraiser inspects. They don't. They do inspect for things they have to look at, but they don't look at everything. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Appraisals versus inspections. Basically, an appraiser is going to look at value. They want to look at what's normal in certain areas, depending on what is normal in that neighborhood. It may not even be in that city, but in that particular neighborhood. Is it normal for a house to have more tile flooring than vinyl, more formica than granite, more granite than marble, you know, all those kinds of things. 3-car garage versus a 2-car neighborhood. Appraisers love it when realtors add the upgrades that are in that house to the listing comments, or you can add a whole document. Like if you've got a house that's had a complete renovation and it's amazing, then it behooves you not only to attract a buyer, but also to protect the appraiser who needs to come to a value for that house. Put all of those things on a sheet and include it in the documents section of your listing. You can also add square footage and all the kinds of things there, but one of the documents could be all the improvements that have been done on a house. They're going to look at comparable things, similar size, similar style, similar age, and then cookie cutter areas, you know, where all the houses are sort of based on the same floor plan, but maybe with some different elevations. Those are really great for appraisers because they're just like, those are easy. It's the ones that have been added on to over time or been renovated over time. Any kind of variable makes appraisals a little bit harder. But the appraiser's looking at value. The home inspector is looking at condition and usability. They're looking for repairs that need to be done, how things are going to be used. Now, the VA and FHA appraisers will look at certain condition items. Usually that's going to be peeling paint because of safety issues, you know, peeling paint because of lead-based paint. They're going to look at broken glass. They're going to look at handrails. That's really big if you've got a house with I had one with a porch, and it was like a 1901 house with these massive curved porches in Madison. It was beautiful. But because the porch was a certain height for their safety protocols, the appraiser was looking at how far off the ground would someone fall if they were to fall off that beautiful rounded porch that was across the entire front of this 50-foot, you know, wide house. And I thought, if I had to get railings added to that house, it would be horrific. I mean, the expense would be just through the roof. And luckily we didn't have to do that, but those are some of the things that they consider. So those are the gist of them. They're going to look for most of that. Septic tanks, if the septic tank appears to, you know, not be floating in the yard, they're going to look at those kinds of things. It's really more health and safety than it is actual value or function. And appraisers aren't qualified. They aren't licensed to do property inspections. So there is a form here. This is from the Department of Housing and Urban Development that talks about all the reasons you should get a home inspection. Lately, within the last 2 years, we had a lot of buyers trying to sweeten their offers by removing the home inspection contingency. So people were just throwing everything they could at these houses trying to get them. And so taking that concern off the seller might have given them, you know, an improved opinion with the seller about their offer. But what it left them with was a house that had not been inspected. And so that is a liability, not only for that client, but also for you as their agent. They need to know about radon testing. They need to know why they need a home inspection, what kinds of things would be considered for that they are different from appraisals. And then at the very bottom, what is important about this form is it says, okay, I've been notified about all the reasons I should have a home inspection, and now I'm making a decision. I do or I do not want a home inspection. The reason that it's important for you as an agent to have this in your file folder is because if they come back to you a year later, I can't believe you let me buy this house. Why didn't you tell me? You know, all the things. You can have this form to say, look, we talked about this. You made a calculated decision because you wanted your offer accepted, but how can I help you now? You know, you need a plumber. I've got a plumber. Let me call, you know, I'll give you all the names. I'll help you out however I can. But I did we did talk about the inspection and the risks involved of not having one. Your broker will love you for having something like that. Let's see. So any questions on inspections? Okay. The other thing, if you go into septic systems, they will do a passive water test. A passive water test is basically turning on all the faucets, flushing the toilets, and if all the water goes down, septic system's fine. The problem is when you introduce solids to it. It's the same thing if you're going to sell a house that has had extensive renovation, but it has still the old plumbing. A lot of times construction materials get, flushed down that system and can do damage as it goes through it. So there are companies that will do camera tests of these little fiber optic cameras that you can do down a sewer line to make sure if the sewer line has tree roots in it, any of that sort of thing. And then a septic tank, if you're going to inspect it, they usually have to pump it to be able to truly inspect it. If a house hasn't had a septic tank pumped in 5 or so years, and the house has been fully lived in by lots of people, if the house is full for a long time, something else is full too. Septic tank's probably full. So just keep those things in mind because you want to make sure that you're as covered as you can be. All right. Are we good to go ahead and move on to the dashboard? Is everybody good? And y'all are welcome to unmute if you want and have questions. The dashboard is, oh, yes.
I'm sorry. I do have a friend of mine actually has a mobile home. It was paid for, and she decided to add on. Now she's in the country part of I think it's Coosa County down in Wetumpka area, and her insurance company dropped her, and they told her that she would need to get a realtor to get an inspector to come out, I guess, to reevaluate her home. I'm not certain. But I thought it was kind of strange because it's like this. Oh, they said because the mobile home now is considered a house. And I felt that was kind of strange. I'm like, how can a mobile home that is not on foundation or underpinned with bricks can be turned into a home just because they added on, a room or screened-in porch or something like that?
I don't really know the answer. It sounds like there's a lot more to that. Mainly whenever you do anything, there's a couple of different things. Whenever you add on, you've got all the inspections and the permits you're supposed to do. A lot of times, because why they ask you to get these building permits is because then they have to look at it. Do you need an increased septic system? Do you need, there are a lot of requirements per code for different things. And so if you add on to a building, I know in Madison County, if you have a house that has a certain number of bedrooms or a certain number of bathrooms, there's a requirement, pretty hard requirement on what size septic tank you have to have. So it may be that their infrastructure for that mobile home was fine, but when you add to it, it becomes not fine. So I don't really know how to answer that question, but it sounds like there's more to that.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome. I'm sorry I can't give you more on that, but any other questions? All right. Well, we get into the dashboard, which is brand new. In fact, one of the benefits of not doing this class last week, I know we had to cut it short because of weather, but was because they changed the dashboard literally yesterday. So it was really just the look of it and the usability of it. Before, you had to input your code, your realtor code, and your password every time you went into Paragon. And so now they've got a little bit easier use. But to get into the dashboard, you would now go to Har.Realtor. And I've got the big red arrows. You'd put in your agent ID and your password and then submit. And it will pull you into the dashboard. Of course, on Hard Realtor, you'll have all the different things going on with the Board of Realtors and educational opportunities and things like that. So it's great to kind of put us into our own realtor influenced website, as opposed to Valley MLS, which is where the public generally goes. There's some good information there too, but this is pertinent to us as realtors. When you get into the dashboard, it's going to pull you straight to this screen. And what we're going to do is kind of dive into a few of these apps that we've got. So the Board of Realtors has provided within your dues structure some great value. If you were to buy these things yourself per month, it would be hundreds of dollars. And I know a lot of us will look at dues and go, gosh, that's expensive. But if you use the equipment that they're giving us within those dues, I think you'll be really pleased with it and see a lot of value. When you're showing property, Standard has pretty much become our showing time app. So it's an app for setting up showings. And it is here in this little, looks like a little clock with part of the dial on it. That is my blurry screenshot, but so showing time is there with that navy blue and yellow. When you go into it, you're going to have a profile. You need to set your profile up so that when you are setting up showings, your information comes back through to the other agent. And also, if you're going to set up any kind of reports and things like that, it'll all be branded. You've got the opportunity to have your homepage. Any messages that were sent to you from other agents would show up here in this left-hand column. If you have showings, when you click on that, it'll say either showings that you've requested, showings on your listings, lots of different drop downs. And then your listing setup is the other thing. So when you get a new listing, you want to arrange it in showing time to be able to have those agents easily arrange for showings for your properties. Now, under showings, you can kind of see here on the drop down, it'll say on my listing, on our listings is for a broker type situation. So I can see all of my company's listings or my personal listings. But this one I wanted to point to is the make a new request. So if I wanted to show a house, I'm going to go into showing time. I'll go down to make a new request. The easier way to do it too, if you're not doing a number of showings, is to go to the MLS and you just, on the actual listing, there's a little button that says showing time and you can click on it and set the showing up. But it'll pretty much bring you to the next screen. So the next screen will say if you want to schedule a showing, you can set up the date and all the things that, pick the date. You're going to pick the property. So you can type in just the name of the street. You can type in the street number, and then advanced search, it's going to pull everything in the system it can pull. It's better if you put in the entire address if you remember it. But sometimes people will say, hey, I just want to see the house on Main Street. There's only one house on Main Street, like in Hartselle or whatever. When you pull it up, it'll show you which houses are in the system, and you can click on the house you're wanting to show and begin arranging the showing. So once you've selected the house and which one you're looking for, then you would click on schedule a single showing if you were just going to show that one house. Now, if you're going to show a bunch of houses, we're going to get into that in just a minute, but scheduling a single showing, you would just click on that button. It will give you all the opportunities. So the blacked out sections would be either time that had already passed that day or time that the seller had blocked out. So let's say they work from home and they have meetings from 8 until 5 that particular day, and they don't want any showings. You as their agent can block that out. Or let's say, I think I took the screenshot at 5:30, so it wasn't going to let me set any showings up for time that had already passed. But there are ways that you can black that out, or just know what times are unavailable for the seller to show. But you would click whatever time frame you wanted. In this case, I'd probably say, okay, I want to set it up for Sunday at 10 o'clock, and you click on that time frame, and it takes you to the next section. You would also be able to tell that seller what kind of showing it is, the appointment type. So in this one, it's just a regular showing. There are lots of other options. You could select a second showing if you want to tell that listing agent, hey, my buyer really likes it, they want to see it a second time. You might indicate that just to remind them, because houses get really hot. And if you're having all these showings kind of coming through as the listing agent, they may all sort of blend together, especially if you've got more than one listing. And so if I know I'm having a third showing of a listing, because it pops up on your text and says, okay, you've had a showing request and it's the third showing, I'm going to be contacting that agent going, okay, you've shown it 3 times, where's my offer? Or are we going to have to start charging you rent? Because you're in this house a lot, come on and sell it. Or what can I do to help you sell it is really kind of where that conversation goes. But it does indicate the interest of the buyer and kind of makes you front of mind to the listing agent. If it's a virtual showing, which we had a lot of in the last few years, it's a good idea to say virtual showing. And I'll tell you why. Everybody has a Ring doorbell. And sometimes these sellers will bend over backwards to prepare the house and get it looking good and smelling good. And they get all the kids and the pets and everything in the car, and they leave. And all of a sudden, it's just one agent who shows up, and they're there for 15 minutes and they leave, and there's no buyer. And the seller's like, wait a second, nobody looked at my house. What they didn't see was that agent videoing the house, FaceTiming the house, bringing that buyer in virtually. And so if they knew it was a virtual showing, that wouldn't be such a rub. If it's just an agent preview, if it's just you coming to look at it, and it's an inconvenient time, they may be able to say, hey, I know your agent is just previewing it. Could you maybe come 30 minutes later? And they don't feel as pushed. Or if you're just doing this for transaction management, you might arrange for the appraiser to come in or for the inspection to be done through showing time as well. These can be set up to come to you directly as the realtor, or they can be set up to go directly to the seller to let the seller coordinate the showings. And it really has been a game changer for a lot of people. It's pretty easy to use. You would set up your time frame. So the listing agent can set up if you can have 15-minute showings, 30-minute showings, hour-long showings, whatever the maximum showing time length would be. In this case, you would put in what your start time was, which I had at 9 o'clock in there, and then end time you would adjust there in that appointment end time block. If you wanted to put your buyer's name in, you could. That for some people is easier to manage who you're working with and who has seen what, but it's optional. And then if you're doing it on your own listing, you would either automatically confirm it, or if it's not confirmed and needs to go to the seller for their confirmation, you would put not confirmed. If there are any notes that you need to make to the showing agent, let's say, for instance, hey, I'm showing 12 houses that day. This one's the last one. If I'm running really late, I'll let you know. Or whatever else it is that you need to, make the notes to. It may be that this is a note saying, hey, the dog is in the kennel, or don't let the cat out, or whatever. All right. Showing cart is one. If you're going to be a buyer's agent and you're going to show more than one house at a time, I love this. So showing cart, when I see showing cart, I cue the angels. The angels start singing when I get to showing cart. And the reason I say that is because before GPS and before smartphones and all of that sort of thing, we literally had paper maps. So there was a base realignment and closure in the mid-90s. And that's when Madison exploded. And you would have brand new neighborhoods starting up literally every day. So you'd have to figure out what neighborhood you were showing in, what it was close to, what main existing road it was close to. You'd have to figure out how you were going to show all the different houses. You'd have to map them yourselves. Then you'd have to call each listing agent, owner, whatever, set the showings up. It took hours, like hours and hours. Showing cart takes care of that for you. So with showing cart, you're basically setting up a laundry list of houses that you want to show. And you start with your basic, first destination. Wherever you start your tour is where the mapping will generate from. So let's say we're going to start it at the Huntsville Area Association of Realtors. I'm going to meet my buyer there. And I put that in my first, what they call an other stop. So if you look right above the Huntsville Area Association of Realtors, you'll see add a listing stop or add an other stop. Other stop might be if you were going to meet them at their office, you'd put their office address in there as your starting point. If you were going to meet them at the Board of Realtors, you'd put that, because it's other, it's not a listing, it's just an address. A listing stop would then pull into Valley MLS and pull the listing information to include in your cart. So you'd select a date for your tour. You can, again, put your buyer name in there if you wanted to. A description might help you keep track of it. So I put orientation example for showing cart. And then I'm going to put in all of the addresses that I'm interested in showing. So I want to add a listing stop after my initial, location. So I put in the address of the property and MLS pulls it up. I click on that and it shows up in my showing cart. And then I want to end up at my office. So I put that listing address in, and then I click Smart Route down at the bottom. Smart Route will figure out, like if you have multiple houses, it will map from the first listing or the first address. It'll smart map all of them for you, and it'll give you directions. It'll calculate. Oh, let me go back to this real quick. It'll calculate, and not only will it tell you how far the distance is from stop 2 to stop 3 to stop 4, it'll also tell you what amount of time it will take to get from one to the other. Because if you're showing lots of different areas, say you're showing in Meridianville, and then the next house is going to be in Harvest, and you plan to go Bob Wade Lane down that North Rideout Road or Research Park Boulevard, you're going to go a pretty long distance, but how long will that take you? Because all of that factors into setting up the time frame for what your showings are going to be. And you have to factor in the distance and the time it takes to get there. The other thing about showing time is it also makes feedback requests. So there are companies out there that are going to try to sell you services that, hey, if you buy our service for $50 a month or $39 a month, we're going to contact all the people who have accessed your lockbox and we'll ask them for feedback. Well, if you use showing time, it will do it for you anyway. And it's all part of the showing time fee, which is all part of your dues, which include the other apps I'm going to get to in just a minute. So the feedback that would come would show the agent information, their name, their company, their contact information. Is your client interested in listing? Rate your overall experience, your opinion of the price, and rate the listing, comments, recommendations, all of the things. You can actually have it sent to just the agent or just the homeowner or to both. And if you wanted to, email the feedback to your seller to keep them updated, you can do that and publish that information to them. I think you can update the questions too if you want to modify the questions however you want. And then all of that feedback, if you're the listing agent, will come into your feed and your messages in showing time. All right, any questions on showing time? Y'all are asleep. All right, we're going to go to market stats. Now, market stats is genius. Market stats is awesome. It's this little kind of graph looking thing. What market stats does is it takes information from Valley MLS, all the aggregate data, all the IDX feeds and all the data that comes into the board, and it makes it instantly available to you in multiple different ways. So Down at the bottom, you'll see what the different choices are. So you can get sales prices, either median or average, a month supply, what are the new listing numbers, what sale price is the percentage of the list price, how many homes are for sale, price per square foot, pending sales, dollar volume, closed sales for a certain period of time, how many showings until somebody gets a contract. Just fascinating. So with this, you can search across this, right underneath it says Info Sparks. You can search the entire MLS. You can search it by zip code. You can search it by school district, county, city, any kind of thing. So I used this one time. It was really fascinating. Somebody said, okay, I'm looking at a house in Huntsville, this particular house in this particular zip code. And I wonder, is my investment better there, or should I buy this house in Madison, this zip code? And where would what would the average sale price difference be? I mean, you could sit there and calculate it and do all the things, but with market stats, you can go in and where it says entire MLS, you can put in, let's say where the board is, 35801. You could put that in. And then right next to it says add an area. You can add an area and put 35758, and then you'll get two lines on the bar graph. The two lines will be, one will be 35801, the other will be 35758, so Madison. And you will, in a line graph, compare the two based on whatever across the bottom you want to do. You can do different property types. So let's say that I did 35801 and 35802 here. So I've got 35801 as the first line, which is in blue. 35802 is the red line, and it kind of shows you they're fairly similar. One's a little bit, as far as numbers go, a little bit higher than the other, but not much. There are some that are very different. It could be that you want to compare 4-bedroom homes to 3-bedroom homes, because I've had some people say, what's the value of a bedroom? Well, market stats lets you look at that. You can limit it if you wanted to make it really tight. You could limit it by the size house to compare houses in one zip code to another zip code of a certain bedroom number and a certain size. Data people love market stats. They will also, instead of a line graph, they'll do it in a bar graph. So the bar graph would give you a different, rendering of the same information. And then this one showed the percentage of the list price to the, basically how close to sale price or list price are you getting? And on average, they were doing pretty well. But the big thing here, this makes you an authority. So when you see people that'll say, what is your market data? Click here for instant market data. This information, if you did Madison County or Lauderdale County or wherever it is that you're working, if you put that in and you want to share that information, there's a button that says share. You can share the static information, which is just what you're seeing on your screen right now. The live data is updated with all the new data that comes through the Board of Realtors. So it's a link to that active data. And then you can figure out how you want to share it. So do you want to print that static data and use it for a mailing or any kind of printing? Do you want to use it as social media, an email, so that people can share it and they have these links and they hold on to these links and they, make you go viral? Do you want to embed it in your blog or your website? In which case there's always going to be a little widget where somebody can look at active data on your site. Or do you just want to use that information for your own data? Do you want to put it in a spreadsheet and work with the numbers? You can do all of that with market stats. All right, anything else on market stats? And then real quick, because I know we're running out of time, List Track is great for if you're going to list houses. It gives you these wonderful reports that are all branded. I've cut out my logo, my information, but if you have all your data in there, it will brand it for you. It'll show all the people, your sellers all of the information that is being aggregated out from the Board of Realtors and who is seeing it. How many property views, how many times has it been shared, how many inquiries have been made on that property, how many times it's been favorited across the different avenues that we put it out to, what the websites are that people are seeing it, what cities people are looking at the information for. You can view your own online analytics. You can deliver a monthly or a weekly report to your seller. It gives you more information where you can manage similar homes. If there's houses in that neighborhood that you want to kind of keep track of, it will let you do that, and you can compare, you know, your views and similar views of houses. So this one in the light purple are the views for the subject property, and then in the gold, that's the average views for other homes that are similar. And so you see it's doing pretty well. Also the visitors, the views that people have had. These bar graphs are wonderful for showing dates of price reductions in open houses and activity that you've done to help them see their house. When they're listing information, their visitors, their views flatlines, their listing is flatlining. That's why I always tell people, we need a blip on the screen. Let's reduce the price. Let's do an open house. Let's do something. We need a blip on the screen for your line of activity, people seeing your property. You get a map as well, a heat map that'll show you where the views are for your particular properties. And they're a little harder to read until you can kind of really dive deep into the map. But there's a way to take that information and also to just look at the list of the zip codes of where people are seeing this property. And so you can see most of them are in Huntsville and Madison County. But there may be some where you'll see a bunch of people from Texas or a bunch of people from Albuquerque or wherever. And you think, gosh, maybe I should do a targeted ad to that zip code in Albuquerque, because obviously there are people looking at it there. So this one will have similar homes. When it had that similar homes information, this will tell you item by item which houses had the most views that were similar. So when sellers are saying, well, how'd my neighbor do? Am I beating my neighbor? You can say, yes, you're beating your neighbor. Look, you've had this many more views. Hey, but they got an offer and you didn't. So what do we need to do to fix that? And I think we're done for the day. Does anybody have questions? I'm trying to be respectful of your time, and I know I've been rattling on. Christina, I think they're done. If y'all have any questions, you're welcome to ask. I'm just like talking into I'm just talking all over, so.
Well, thank you, Sarah Lauren.
You're welcome.
Right at 11:30, look at that. Impressive, impressive. All right, everyone. Well, just a reminder, we've always got classes coming up, so just make sure to look at your weekly newsletter and log in periodically to see what's available. And I'm going to email out this link to everyone, so those that weren't here can get it, and then you guys will have access to it as well if you need to reference it in the future. All right. Well, thank you guys. Y'all have a good rest of your week. Thank you, Sarah Lauren.
You're welcome.
Thank
Bye.
you.